We're not asking, Jade. We're telling you. My father's voice didn't even waver. He set his fork down on the linen tablecloth like he was closing a business deal, not evicting his own daughter from her bedroom. You're single, my mother added, not looking up from her salad. You don't need the master suite. Caleb and Ashley need the space. She's pregnant, for God's sake. You can take the basement. I sat there, my hand frozen halfway to my water glass. The basement. The unfinished, damp concrete box under my own house. The house I bought. The house I pay the mortgage on. He's your brother, my father said, his eyes hard. He saved your life from Marco. You owe him your comfort. You owe him everything. I looked across the table at Caleb. He was smirking, already mentally measuring my room for his gaming setup. Done, I said quietly. They thought I was agreeing. They didn't know I was already planning the war. Before I tell you what I found on the security cameras that changed everything, drop a comment telling me, what is the most unreasonable thing a family member has ever demanded of you? I'm reading every single one. I walked out of that dining room without saying another word to any of them. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just walked out into the biting Chicago wind, got into my car and sat there while the engine idled, watching my breath fog up the windshield. I'm Jade, 29 years old. I restore 17th century oil paintings for a living. My entire career is built on patience, precision, and the ability to see things that other people miss. I spend my days removing centuries of varnish and grime to reveal the truth underneath. I am trusted with assets worth more than my parents' entire lifetime earnings. But in that house, I wasn't a professional. I wasn't a homeowner. I was just the debtor. Started 10 years ago. The Marco incident. That's what we called it. The night Caleb came home with a shattered leg and a story that would become the foundation of our family mythology. He said he took a beating to save me from a local thug named Marco. He said he stepped in when I was cornered. He said he was the shield. I didn't remember it that way. I remembered a confused blur, a text from Caleb telling me to meet him and then running for my life. But my memory was fuzzy with panic and his leg was broken in 3 places. The cast was real. The limp was real. And my parents decided the story was real too. They looked at his cast, then at me, and they forged a chain right there in the hospital room. It is a specific kind of psychological prison, the prison of the blood debt. They didn't just ask for gratitude, they demanded a life sentence. For a decade they weaponized that night. Every time I achieved something, a scholarship, a promotion, a high-profile client, my mother would sigh and say, "It's a shame Caleb can't do that. His leg, you know. He gave up his football scholarship for you." It was a masterclass in conditioning. They taught me that my success was actually theft. If I won, it was only because Caleb had sacrificed his ability to run. They conditioned me to believe that my very existence was a burden I had to pay off in installments. So I paid. I paid with my autonomy. I paid with my silence. I paid his rent when he couldn't find work, because his leg hurt. I bought this house, this beautiful historic Victorian in Chicago, thinking it would finally be enough. I thought if I provided the perfect venue for their family gatherings, if I gave them a place to shine, the debt would finally be settled. But debt collectors like my parents don't want the balance paid off. They want the interest payments to last forever. They wanted the house, the master suite, the dignity, everything. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 10 years ago I was a scared little girl who believed she was a burden. But tonight, sitting in the dark, I wasn't scared. I was an archivist. I knew how to look for cracks in a masterpiece. And I knew that under the varnish of Caleb's heroism, there was something rotting. They thought they had broken me into submission. They didn't realize that when you push someone into the basement, they stop caring about burning the house down. I put the car in drive. I wasn't going to the basement. I was going to find out exactly what happened 10 years ago. Because I was done paying for a lie. 3 days later, I came home to a crime scene. I had been in New York evaluating a collection for a client, breathing air that didn't smell like obligation. I drove straight from O'Hare to my house, desperate for the silence of my studio. My sanctuary. The climate-controlled, dust-free zone where I kept the world out. I put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it, pulled it back, tried again. Nothing. It felt gritty, like someone had forced the wrong key in and twisted until the tumblers screamed. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my stomach. I walked around to the back, to the garden entrance. That door was unlocked. Wide open, actually swinging gently in the winter draft. The smell hit me before I crossed the threshold. It was a thick, cloying mix of stale beer, cheap weed, and something burning. My stomach turned. I walked into the hallway, my heels clicking on the hardwood, echoing too loudly. The living room was a disaster. Pizza boxes, overturned chairs. But I didn't care about the furniture. I ran to the studio. The double doors were propped open with one of my antique busts. I stopped. My breath caught in a throat that felt suddenly too tight to swallow. My studio was surgical. White walls, air purifiers humming, tools aligned in perfect rows. Now it looked like a fraternity house after a bender. There were red plastic cups on my drafting table. Ash on the floor. And there, sitting in my ergonomic chair, feet up on my workbench, was Caleb. He was holding a beer, surrounded by 3 friends I didn't recognize. They looked up, glassy-eyed and sluggish. Jade. Caleb slurred, grinning like he hadn't just broken into my house. You're back early. We were just christening the place. Breaking in the vibes. I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on the easel in the center of the room. It held a 17th-century Dutch landscape I had been restoring for 6 months. It belonged to Arthur Sterling, a man whose net worth had its own zip code. It was a masterpiece of light and shadow, valued at $250,000. And it was ruined. A jagged tear ran right through the center of the canvas, slashing through the painted sky like a wound. A beer bottle sat on the floor beneath it, the neck broken. I walked over to it. My hands were shaking, not with fear but with a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. I touched the air in front of the canvas, afraid to even graze the damage. Oops, Caleb said from behind me. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded bored. Yeah, Mike got a little clumsy with the bottle opener. It's just an old painting, Jade. Relax. I'll buy you some duct tape. Duct tape, I repeated. My voice sounded strange, detached. We were celebrating, he said, standing up and swaying slightly. Celebrating life. You know, since you were being such a bitch about the basement, I thought I'd remind you who the real man of the house is. Mom and Dad said I could use the space. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the entitlement etched into his face. The smugness of a man who has never paid for a mistake in his entire life because his parents always picked up the tab. He thought this was a power move. He thought he was putting me in my place. He didn't realize he had just handed me the weapon that would end him. I didn't scream. I didn't throw them out. I simply turned around, walked out of the studio and went straight to my car. I needed my laptop. And I needed to see exactly what the security cameras had recorded before he found them. The war wasn't coming. It was here. I drove 3 blocks away and parked under the yellow glare of a street lamp. I didn't cry. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I had something more important to do. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark car, a portal to the truth I had been denied for a decade. My security system is cloud-based, motion-activated, and unforgiving. Captures everything in high-definition audio and video. I didn't need to run complex algorithms or guess passcodes. I just logged in and clicked the file timestamped 2 hours ago. The video filled the screen. It was like watching a nature documentary about parasites. I watched Caleb strut through my living room, kicking off his muddy boots on my white rug. I watched his friends raid my liquor cabinet, pulling out bottles I had been saving for special occasions. I watched them enter the studio. I fast-forwarded. I needed to see the moment the painting died. There it was. 8:14 in the evening. Caleb was swinging a bottle of beer around, miming a golf swing. He lost his grip. The bottle flew, smashing into the canvas. He didn't gasp. He didn't freeze. He laughed. A wet, ugly sound. Strike, one of his friends yelled. But that wasn't the part that stopped my heart. It was what happened 10 minutes later. They were sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my work. They were drunk, loose-lipped, and feeling invincible. One of his friends, a guy named Mike, pointed at the slashed painting. Jade's gonna kill you, man. Seriously. That looks expensive. Caleb took a long drag from a joint and exhaled smoke toward my ceiling. She won't do anything. He can't. She owes me. Still riding that train? Mike asked. That was, 10 years ago? The gift that keeps on giving, Caleb said, grinning. Best broken leg I ever had. I leaned closer to the screen. The air in the car felt suddenly thin. I still can't believe you pulled that off, Mike laughed. Marco wanted his money and you offered him your sister? That's cold, bro. It was business, Caleb said, and his voice was so casual it made my skin crawl. I owed Marco $5,000. I told him he could have Jade for an hour to square the debt. I lured her to the warehouse. It was perfect. I stopped breathing. The memory flashed in my mind. The warehouse, Caleb texting me to come help him, the shadows, the fear. But the little bitch ran, Caleb continued, shaking his head. She bolted before Marco even saw her. I panicked. I tried to run after her, slipped on that patch of black ice near the loading dock and snap. Bone through the skin. And you told your parents Marco beat you up saving her? I told them I took a tire iron for her, Caleb smirked. I told them I was a hero. And they bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Dad looked at me like I was Captain America. Jade looked at me like she wanted to die from guilt. I knew right then. I owned her. 10 years, Mike. 10 years of rent, bills, and now this house. All because I tripped on some ice. He laughed again, raising his beer to the camera he didn't know was watching. To the ice. I paused the video. The silence in my car was absolute. For 10 years I had carried a mountain of guilt on my back. I had let it crush my dreams, my finances, and my self-worth. I had believed I was the reason he walked with a limp. I had believed I was a burden he had paid for in blood. But there was no blood debt. There was only a failed transaction. He hadn't saved me. He had tried to sell me. I looked at his face on the screen, frozen in a pixelated gloat. The sadness vanished. The grief evaporated. In their place, a cold, crystalline clarity settled over me. I wasn't a debtor anymore. I was the creditor. And it was time to collect. I saved the file. Then I copied it to 3 different drives. I closed the laptop, put the car in gear, and drove back toward the city lights. I had a dinner reservation to crash. The Legacy Club smells like old leather, cigar smoke, and desperate social climbing. It's the kind of place where the carpet is older than the country and silence is considered a virtue. My parents love it here. It makes them feel important. I walked into the private dining room they had booked. They were already seated, a tableau of manufactured dignity. My father, Richard, was swirling a glass of scotch. My mother, Susan, was adjusting her pearls, looking pained. And Caleb, my tormentor, my hero, was stuffing his face with bread, looking entirely too comfortable for a man who had just committed a felony. The most important person in the room wasn't at our table. 2 tables away sat Arthur Sterling, the billionaire client whose painting Caleb destroyed, quietly reading a report. I'd texted him earlier with one line: "The vandal will be at the Legacy Club at 8. If you want justice, be there." He gave me a small nod as I passed. That was enough. At dinner, my parents dismissed the destruction as an accident and demanded I file a false insurance claim to protect Caleb. He even smirked, insisting I handle it before the owner came after him. Calmly, I stood, tapped my glass, and projected a video onto the club's main screen. The room froze as footage played. Caleb drunk, destroying the painting, then confessing he'd sold me to settle a debt. The silence afterward was suffocating. Caleb panicked, shouting it was fake, but I revealed the evidence was authenticated and the police were already on their way. Officers entered as my mother tried to block them. That's when she struck back, boasting she'd impersonated me to cancel my insurance retroactively. No coverage, she said. I was bankrupt. Then Arthur Sterling stood beside me and calmly explained subrogation. His insurer would pay him, then sue the vandal, and anyone who helped cover it up. My parents had just confessed to fraud in front of police and witnesses. Within days, Global Zurich froze their assets. They lost their house, savings, and pensions. Caleb took a plea deal and went to prison. His family left him. I restored the painting myself. 4 months of microscopic work. When I unveiled it, Sterling called it flawless and paid me more than I'd ever earned. That night, I upgraded my home security, deleted my mother as my emergency contact, and poured myself a glass of wine in a silence I'd earned. They called me the villain. Maybe I am. But I sleep peacefully in a life that finally belongs to me.